Gabe, I saw a quote the other day, and I think it's a great quote to kick off today's episode. And it says, being a scientist is not just a profession, it's a frame of mind. Scientific tools are not reserved for people in white coats and beakers. Hypotheses have as much of a place in our lives as they do in a lab. Experiments can inform our daily decisions. And I think that's a great introduction into what we should be talking about today with split testing.
I love that quote, Zach. I thought that was such a great one to kick off this episode about split testing or A/B testing, as it's often referred to. And I thought it was a really good follow-up also to the discussion that we had last week around personalization, where we discussed personalization. And so much of what we discussed around personalization was around data being the foundation for a good personalization process. And this week, as we talk about that A/B or split testing, guess what? Good data, it's still really important as the baseline to have a high quality test and be able to determine what outcome you actually want to drive based on that test.
We've talked about this quite a bit. And Gabe, I don't want to speak for the two of us, but I think you know, and I think I know this of you as well, but we're very data driven marketers, right? Everything we do, I should say 99% of what we do is based on data and how can we tell that story. So I think in all of my conversations I have with customers, we talk about different ways to A/B test and validate what we're trying to accomplish here. But I think there's a very important question of why should people A/B test?
Yeah. Yeah, it's a great place to start. And what we're going to do in today's episode is we're actually going to walk through kind of a framework of what we would recommend as you're doing an A/B test or a split test. And I think there are a lot of do's and don'ts, and we want to kind of talk through that today just to make sure that we're providing folks with some good resources around how to actually make this happen and do it in a way that is repeatable and is going to drive some interesting results. So to your point about why test, to me, it's really about, to go back to that quote, you don't exactly know the answer. You have a hypothesis about something and you want to determine, is the thing that I'm thinking actually correct? Is the creative that I want to use for this ad going to resonate? Is the copy that I want to use for this ad going to resonate? Is the channel that I'm going to use for this ad going to resonate? So that's the kind of beauty of A/B testing, is you can test all of these different things. And I know we're going to talk about later about maybe not testing multiple things at the same time, but it's a great way to provide you that insight into which one of those things is actually going to be effective and use that data to then inform your decisions.
I feel like I have this conversation every day. Why did my email conversions, or why was my click-through rate low? Why was my Facebook ad click-through rate low? Things like that. I hear that quite often. And one of my first questions is, well, like, what did you test it against? Something like that. Or what were the results? And I think one of the keys here is, even with A/B testing, there's not going to be a magic answer, right? You're going to get, especially with digital marketing, you're going to have insights into what works and what does not work.
Yes, I love that. And you're right, there is no necessarily magic answer. It's constantly testing different things to see how close you can get to that magic answer. And it's probably never going to be perfection. And that's, I think, the part that people struggle with marketing sometimes, is there isn't always a perfect answer. But by going through and doing these tests, you can get to something that hopefully gives you a lot more insight than maybe you had previously.
I agree. So talking about A/B tests, for those who might be new to an A/B test, Gabe, one of the first steps we do is defining the objectives. What do you want to do?
Yeah, it's a classic roadmap thing. If you don't know where you're going, how can you measure success? And that has to start with being really specific about what objective you're wanting to drive. And I know we're going to talk through some of these examples, but again, there's a real need to be specific here when you're defining those objectives. Write those objectives down, whether it's on a piece of paper or whiteboard or whatever, but have it someplace so that when you're done with this test, this was the objective I was trying to drive. And this could be things like, growing your database of email addresses or improving engagement. Zach, you talked just a moment ago about open rates, click-through rates. Why are my opens or clicks or conversions maybe a little higher, a little lower on this particular campaign that I ran? Going through and then testing that after the fact will help you understand that.
That's a really good example. And for those who know me, they know I hate email open rates. I do not enjoy that metric just because I don't think it's accurate. And I like to focus on the conversion. But, you still have to get people into your email. You still have to have people, see your social ads, things like that. So there's definitely opportunity there to split test and exactly, what you talked about. Make sure that we're bringing in and improving engagement on whatever platform we are using.
Well, and to talk about that kind of multi-platform thing, I think a lot of where A/B testing gets done is in email. And there's a lot of reason why you would want to do that because it is measurable, to your point. You can measure the opens, you can measure the clicks, you can measure the conversion. So from a digital perspective, you're getting all that feedback back, not to repeat myself, but all that feedback, into your knowledge base there, so to speak. But it doesn't have to stop with email. It can be, certainly A/B testing on different social platforms. Facebook or Meta has ways to do this very easily within Ads Manager. So it doesn't have to stop with just A/B testing in email. You can leverage it across different channels also.
And I want to touch base on that Meta comment real quick because, for those who don't do A/B testing or are making, the broad assumptions, the thing I'd like to point out is there's probably a reason, Meta has that A/B checkbox on step number 1 of creating your ad, right?
That's such a great point.
It's very important. And so many people tend to skip over that. And I understand from an extent, if you're limited with resources, you just got to get the ad out. Like I've seen that a million times. But again, checking that, building that second version of the ad, it's going to provide you with better data. Gabe, we've looked at tons of different pivot tables. Not to bring Excel into this, but we had to bring up the pivot table of ad data, and we've seen this firsthand now.
Yep, I think it's a great point, and I hadn't thought about that. It's such a great point you brought up there around that A/B test being really early on in the process of building an ad and Ads Manager, and I'm sure you're right. I'm sure that is for a reason, and it's because they do want more people doing it. Now, ultimately, that's good for Meta too, because they're getting more data, they're getting more insight, they're getting you to run more ads. So I understand why they would want to do it too. But it is something that can be very valuable for marketers to really understand, what is driving conversions, what's driving clicks, those sorts of things. And I think it also allows you to, this gets a little bit trickier, but analyzing different channels, if that's the objective that you want to get out of this. Obviously different content is going to work differently across different channels. So you can't always necessarily point to, well, I used the same copy in an email and the same image in an email, and I ran it on social and the social performed better. Therefore, I'm going to do more on social because that test proved it out. That's a little bit dangerous, but I still do think it's at least a high level way to start to kind of test some of those channels and then start to take that even further with testing and also help drive better customer experiences too, across different digital tactics, whether that be Google, or just NPS scores, CSAT scores, things like that.
I love the omni-channel approach. I don't know if you've ever done any like Snapchat advertising, Gabe. It really depends on your target market, but to your point there, if you see that you have lower results on Snapchat than you do on Instagram, depending on your industry, depending on your target market, that could give you data to review how you're marketing your business on these platforms. I'm not a big fan of Snapchat advertising, so I hate to throw them under the bus like that, but it's a great way to identify low performing channels and then continuing that discussion. Why is it a low performing channel? Is it my target audience to begin with? Was the message not clear? Was the content wrong? So there's so many things you can do there, but I love the idea you mentioned, Gabe, of reviewing the channels, but also could be a dangerous path because you don't want to narrow yourself into a single channel.
Yeah, agreed. I think you can maybe get a little bit myopic there and focus too much on one channel when just because it happens to be driving success for you in comparison to some of the others. And certainly testing and then doubling down on things that are successful is important, but you don't want to do it at the expense of just completely ignoring some of this other stuff. To go back to your Snapchat comment, I think a lot of people don't like Snapchat ads, which is probably why Snap as a company is not been doing awesome. From
Whoa, hey,
from
they
a
had good
financial
earnings this
perspective.
week.
They did actually this last quarter, but it's been quite a few quarters since they.
Wait, we gotta like pause for a second. Gabe, do you have a Snapchat account?
I do not have a Snapchat account. Nope.
Like, have you you've never
Nope.
had one?
TikTok
Oh my
and
gosh.
Snapchat are the two that I am just completely out on. Have never had.
I remember in middle school signing up for Snapchat for the first time. You know, this app came out. We were all sitting around. We were in gym for whatever reason on our phones, and we all signed up. But it became like the primary communication tool for me for a while. Like that's how I interact with like friends and siblings. And like when Snap Maps came out, it was like the best thing because you could see like what's happening. You know what's going on. Now, you know, not so much. You know, my usage of Snapchat's basically just viewing content and, again, you know, Snap Maps seeing where everyone's at. But for a while, it seemed like it was like the communication app, and now I don't know like if it's like a generational thing, but I just don't see. I don't enjoy the experience on Snap. I guess the ads are trash to begin with. There's too many. It's changed since middle school. Back in my day.
Well, yeah. Now, welcome to the other side of now disparaging social media platforms. But it's I know I mentioned TikTok briefly. I saw a great tweet earlier this week about somebody being so happy with themselves that they never downloaded TikTok and now they don't have to worry about it getting sold off or banned. And I'm like, that's me too. This is great. I never interacted with this app at all, so now I don't have to worry about the fact that it's going to get banned or sold or whatever.
And that's one place I've never really run ads is on TikTok, so I don't even have any A/B stories to tell there. I've posted organically. And that's about the extent of my use for business TikTok. But we've talked about it for years now, Gabe. You know, they're finally trying to ban TikTok. You know, they signed it into law. So we'll see what happens next. But I'm genuinely curious. I don't think it's going away. Obviously, it's out of my control. I don't want to see it go away, but I'm very interested just to see where this goes. It's like drama happening in life that I'm not a part of. And I'm just like on the sideline eating popcorn. So I'm just waiting to see what happens with this.
I'm excited to see how productive you are once TikTok doesn't exist anymore and you get all that time back in your life. You're going to be cranking.
Oh my gosh. You guys, it's like a rebranding, you know, for me. You guys are going to know who I am here in the next few. It's funny, and we'll get back to A/B testing after this, but there's a few people on TikTok I just cannot stand, like terrible people in general. No redeeming qualities. And they just live on TikTok. And part of me is just like, let's get rid of the app and just see what happens to them.
It's going to be a wild social experiment if this actually does end up happening, to see what happens, you know, because people spend so much time on that application. What if it does get banned, what comes up to replace it? You know, I know I was talking with my sister this week actually, and she was saying, we were talking about TikTok getting banned potentially, and you know, she's like, Reels it's just not the same thing. Like, it's just not the same user experience. It's not something where I want to go on and, you know, and actually consume content for a long period of time. So even Meta, who obviously has this massive base of users, may not necessarily see as much of a bump as they're expecting if TikTok goes away.
Yeah, I really do not think it will just, you know, magically go away. I would like to think someone would buy them, but you know, it's not going to be Facebook. It's not going to be Google. They have their own problems at this point. So we'll continue this conversation. I don't know. I feel like that Kermit the Frog meme. You know, it's like the evil Kermit, and I actually don't know the name of the meme now. But I have like both sides here, like ban TikTok and then like don't ban TikTok. But back to A/B testing.
All right, yes, let's get back to the topic at hand.
Last week it was LinkedIn. This week it was TikTok that distracted us. But we're on a roll here. Campaign elements to test. One of the things I hear a lot is, I changed, you know, these 10 elements of my campaign, whether it's a social ad or email. And I'm like, well, great, because which of those 10 elements you know, actually helped us with that end metric, that objective. And one of the things with A/B testing is you really want to limit how many variables you're testing. So email as an example, if you change the subject line, I wouldn't go too crazy within that email. I believe Rivian just sent out a survey this week, to select reservation holders of their upcoming R2. This is like right up my alley. And they did A/B testing. They did different survey questions for, same email, but they changed the survey questions with different groups. So it's a great way to get data. But again, you want to minimize how many data variables you change at once. You don't want complex results, and you want to know exactly what change you made and what the impact was.
Yeah, when you're the fancy word multivariate, right? Which I felt like I was going to screw up as soon as I said it, but I think I got it right. That becomes more complex, and I feel like it's exponentially more complex. So if you have two variables, it's quite easy to test between an A and a B. As soon as you add an A, B, C, it doesn't become 100% more complex. It probably becomes 200% more complex. So I'm totally with you. You've got to be really thoughtful, and that may mean that you have to run multiple tests, but you're going to get better results and you're going to get better information.
If you're new to A/B testing, start with an A and a B. Like, start simple, right?
Yes.
See where that goes. And again, we talked about email, the subject lines. Think your Facebook ads as well. Change the image out. Change the headline, or even the call to action. On one of my favorite call to action A/B test was we did a call now versus like a website URL, and just seeing how people engage with you in that call to action component. It was fascinating.
You didn't do my favorite, learn more call to action? Come on.
Oh my gosh. Since we're on the subject of Facebook now, those call to actions, I do not like the predefined call to actions you have.
I don't either. It's super annoying. I don't know why they don't have flexibility for those.
I mean, I feel like I'm guessing it has to relate to user experience and how people would abuse the call to action buttons. But Gabe, we've talked about call to actions a lot. I'm a big fan of adding some urgency into your call to action. Like, learn more are great. Like, I don't care, right?
It's so generic.
And the fact that every social ad uses it, it's just terrible.
Yeah, agreed. Well, but like you said, there are different options in there. There's like a shop now or order now or whatever, right? There are things that are a bit more aggressive, and I think it's a great point about run the exact same ad, but just with two different calls to action. Like when we're talking about limiting the amount of variables, that's what we're talking about. Or like you said, just change out the image and keep everything else the same. Like you've got to be thoughtful about not putting too much in there. Otherwise, you're going to end up with results that just don't make any sense. So I wanted to kind of run through this list, Zach, of kind of like the most common things that we would recommend people test. So I'm just going to walk through these really quick, and then we can circle back and talk about a couple of them. So time of day, be a huge one, right? When you're actually sending ads, whether that be emails or running social posts, or running social ads, I should say, and day parting being a big part of that. Day of the week, frequency. So how often is somebody getting that email or seeing a social ad? Subject lines, we've talked about a little bit. And then content creative, we also talked about a bit, that imagery or whatever. And then the last one, which I definitely want to talk about because I'm going to get nerdy about this one, is offers and discounts and what that looks like to drive conversions, but also what that looks like to drive kind of long-term value. So which one of those jumps out to you? What do you want to get into?
Which one? How about every single one? All seven. Time of day. This is one everyone's used. And for my example, I want to focus more on email, but I think we can also talk push notifications on this one as well. When are you sending out that notification? When are you sending out that email? Does it make sense to send it out at 2 a.m. versus perhaps, Gabe, we always talk about Uber Eats around dinner time when people might be buying food, or I think I don't know if it was a Super Bowl, Gabe, or just a random Sunday night football game, but you had mentioned like the game day ad. So there's different time of days you can think of as well. Time of week, same thing. I've done this before too. There's different times of the week where posts are just more active, and if you use any kind of social media planning tool, they've probably got like a heat map or a calendar that says your audience is this active at this day of the week. And again, it's a great way to determine when to send out that content. Frequency.
We were talking about this earlier. You made a comment about LinkedIn, and even organic posts on LinkedIn. If you don't post something by noon on a Friday, like don't even bother, right? Like it's just going to go into an absolute black hole, and people are not going to see it. So if you're that's a very specific one around a very specific platform. But again, by Friday afternoon, people are not necessarily going to be scrolling through their LinkedIn as the top thing they're going to do, versus maybe Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday folks are going to be a lot more active. So that's a really simple one, but one that I think is just a good example.
I mentioned a couple weeks ago the Taco Bell app, and I'm glad to come back to this topic because it relates to, I feel like, frequency, day of week, and time of day.
Yeah.
I deleted that app. It's a place I go maybe once a year, right? Back in college, once a week, but maybe once a year. So to get a notification every day at the most random times, if it was kind of when I was wrapping up for the day, thinking of dinner, maybe what, not that Taco Bell needs to know when I'm hungry, but I feel like they could guess. It was just spam. And I know you can go in and turn off notifications, but terrible experience. The app was deleted, and this was my message a few weeks ago was be careful when you use a channel that is that personal. Like I mentioned, I think the example I used, it's like sending a text message, right into the palms of someone's phone. So use caution there. But I feel like that was time of day was wrong. The day of the week, likely wrong. I feel like I'm more apt to eat out at the end of the week than the beginning of the week. I don't know if there's any data on that. I'm sure there is. Frequency, again, don't spam me. But that was the end of that app. So next one here, Gabe, you mentioned was subject lines. And this is I feel like this is the base A and B test. If you're doing email campaigns and have not tested your subject lines, that's step one. And there's so many tools out there. Gabe, we love talking about AI. Actually, I feel like I say you love talking about AI more than I do. I'm more cautious, but CoSchedule, it's a site I've used to test email subject lines. Lately, they've integrated with AI. You can do social posts. You can do you get email subject lines. There's other options in there as well, but it's a great tool where you can just take in your subject line, take in your Facebook ad copy, put it right into their tool, and they grade it. They give recommendations, and they use AI to maybe suggest a new one as well. So there's all kinds of different things you can do with this tool, but I feel like subject lines, Gabe, that's like A/B testing 101. What do you think?
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I think it's one of the easier things to do because everything else remains the same. And then you can just do those two different subject lines and look at the actual results. Now, I really like CoSchedule too. I think that's a great tool, and especially to do this testing of different subject lines. I love the score that it gives you, just to give you a little bit of an understanding. And sometimes the scores are so close that it comes out with an 85 versus an 86 or something. But sometimes you write a subject line and you think it's going to be great, and it'll end up getting a 60, and you're like, oh crap! All right, well that was clearly garbage. I better go back to the drawing board and do something else. But what I like about I love that tool. I think it's a great one to really test that subject line piece for sure.
Yeah, and one of the last ones, which I know you want to geek out about, is offers, discounts.
Yes.
And you mentioned customer lifetime value as well. So Gabe, I will turn it over to you.
Yeah, this is one I'm a bit of a lunatic about, and where I think this becomes so important is I often think about how I purchase things, and how a new company that I'm doing business with, if they offer me some kind of offer or discount, obviously there's that incentive to purchase it for the first time. But what is the likelihood that I'm going to go back and become a long-term customer, and my average order value is going to continue to increase, and I'm going to continue to drive longer-term value for that company? So this is one that plays out over a little bit of a longer period of time, because you need to understand, I made this offer to somebody, they purchased this, and then long-term, what does that value actually look like? So it's a bit of a longer-term play, but I think it's something that is so important because it really speaks to the financial lifeblood of your company. And if your offer is 50% off versus buy one, get one free, maybe a buy one, get one free is actually a better offer longer term, because you're providing that person multiple things, whatever that thing is that they happen to be purchasing, but multiple things that they're going to interact with, consume, wear, whatever. And that creates a longer term customer that's going to place more orders and drive more value long term. So again, it's one that has to play out over a slightly longer period of time. It's not going to be like a subject line test where after a week you have a pretty good idea which one worked and which one didn't. But I think it's one of the more important ones that people can do, because again, it speaks to the financial lifeblood potentially of your company.
I agree, Gabe. I think that's a great example as well. And you know me, I'm all about the offers and discounts. So that's, I feel like, was it 2 weeks ago we talked about loyalty programs too? There's a lot you can do with that as well. One of the next items here, Gabe, testing the framework. And this is we've kind of built out a matrix on this as well, Gabe, focusing on automating, testing, and prioritizing, and exploring as well. Do you want to walk us through what this A/B testing framework is and how we can start to use it?
Yeah, think of it as a simple 4-box. So, and in the 4-box, you've got known knowns, known unknowns, unknown knowns, and unknown unknowns. And when you're thinking about testing, you need to think about, well, what thing do I actually need to test? And that would be kind of known unknowns. So to give a really specific example, that Instagram is the best place to drive conversions for your social advertising. You've tested that and that piece. What you don't know is if I've got 2 images or 2 pieces of copy, which one is actually going to drive the best conversions. So again, I know that, and I'm just making up an example here, but I know that Instagram is the best place for me to run my ads. What I don't know is what image is going to resonate best with my customers and prospects to get them to purchase something. So that falls into that kind of known unknown category, that's really what you want to test. So again, think about it like that simple kind of 4-box.
Shameless plug here, Gabe, because just hearing you describe this matrix, I was trying to visualize this. Let's get this matrix up on the blog and have that visual that people can kind of follow. Because one of the exercises you can do is you can actually take this matrix and write in, your known knowns, your unknown knowns, your known unknowns, and that's enough of saying those 2 words. But
I know it's so hard to say them all.
I was just trying to get them in the right spot. But you can visualize this, and that will help you build out your campaign test. And Gabe, I think it's a great matrix to look at too.
I agree. I think it really helps provide structure around understanding what it is that you need to test versus things that fall just more into the automation category or something like that. So it gives you a really good framework to determine what it is. And I'm with you, Zach. Write it down, and then like we were talking about earlier with defining the objectives, then you can go back and actually get a better understanding of what was that outcome, what was that hypothesis, which actually sort of leads us nicely into the, I didn't actually even plan that transition, but that leads us nicely into the testing plan.
Oh, that was like a true professional.
Man, it was.
It was great.
Did that on my own. Yeah, and this really gets back to the quote that Zach talked about at the beginning of the podcast, which is a hypothesis, and bringing a science-driven approach to your life and specifically your job. Think about back to elementary school. It's a hypothesis isn't necessarily about being right or being wrong. It's about, I have this idea and I want to test it. That's exactly what we're talking about today. And I think maybe this is just anecdotal, but I kind of feel like why people maybe don't run more A/B tests and just tests in general in marketing is because they don't want to be perceived that they did something wrong, to use my air quotes here, or something didn't work out. Whereas in reality,
good data though to know though.
100%, but people don't like failure, right? Mm-hmm. And sometimes if something doesn't work out, it feels like a failure. And if you got to go back to your boss and be like, "Hey, we tried this, it didn't really work, but we gave it our best effort," that's a little bit more of a difficult conversation. And part of that may just be framing in how you go back to your boss and have that conversation. It's, "Hey, we tested A and B, and it turns out that A actually makes a lot more sense for us because of this reason, this reason, and this reason. So now we're going to double down our efforts and go there." So, but because people, I think, oftentimes perceive something that didn't work out fantastically as a failure, it's something that people don't do nearly as much of.
I agree with you, Gabe. I think that's a fantastic example too, and I stand by my comment. If I think at the beginning of the podcast I said, we don't want to market based on assumptions, right?
Yes.
And knowing something's not going to work with your audience is a great way to improve your next ad and even optimize your marketing budget. Let's stop throwing money at an ad campaign or a marketing initiative that's not going to work. It all ties in together. And I think, Gabe, what you said there was exactly it. Don't be afraid to fail. I feel like in split testing, it's good data to have. Maybe in real life too. I haven't decided yet, but it's good data to have.
I mean, I think there's so many things in life, not to get all like super philosophical about this, but there's so many things in life that we don't do because we're afraid of failure. I think something like this podcast is a perfect example. It would have been very easy for us not to do this, Zach. We're busy, we got lives, we got jobs, we got other stuff that we're doing, but we decided that it was important and we wanted to go off and do it. And
well, not to mention this podcast started. Well, it started as a joke too. I really think I think it was it 2 years now, Gabe? I mentioned as a joke, it was like, one of our colleagues said we should start a podcast, and we laughed about it. And then 2 days later, it was like, what if we did? Or we serious about that? And here we are. We haven't failed yet. Have we had episodes where the analytics weren't where we want them to be? Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
Do we know topics to shy away from? For the most part, yes. We still talk about LinkedIn and TikTok and Excel, but the data behind how people engage with this specific content, given it's more of a unique platform now, has driven the conversations we have today.
Mm-hmm, for sure. Well, and yes, and I'll bring it full circle back to this testing plan. So as you're building out the testing plan and creating that hypothesis of what you think is going to work, it's create that hypothesis, define what your objective is, really thinking hard about what it is that you want to drive. I want to drive an increase in click-through rate of 2% over the next month. So again, being very specific about what that goal and outcome is that you want. And then one that I think is probably one of the most important things, Zach, is defining the control group and defining the size, the sample size of how many people you need to actually get data from. Obviously we'd love to have more data from the podcast, around how people are listening and engaging and things like that. But in a normal scenario where you're running ads, you have an opportunity to, set that control group, get a decent size group of people that you can get data back from, so you can actually make some reasonable assertions and assumptions based off of that data.
I agree. And that kind of brings us to our last point as well, Gabe, and that's evaluating the results. So what can you tell us about, I guess, exactly that, evaluating the test you've run and how to action that data?
Yeah, so I think the first thing is going back to the control group and thinking about the size. Typically you'd probably want 1,000 or more responses on any kind of A/B test, on both sides of the A and B, to be able to come up with a statistically significant number of results to be able to feel confident about that. Now, what that means is that maybe you have to run multiple email campaigns, or maybe you have to run multiple social ads or something like that to get to enough data to be considered reasonable size enough. But from there, it's then just an evaluation goes back to the objectives that you set out at the beginning and what specific thing you wanted to do. So to use that example of, I want to drive an increase in my click-through rate of 2%. Okay, well, what was my baseline click-through rate? where did the click-through rates come in for my A versus my B test? And did the thing that I changed actually drive the results that I wanted it to drive? If it didn't, all right, then I'm back to the drawing board and I'm running a different test. And if it did, cool. Now let's double down and really continue to push on that piece that worked successful.
And driving back to that quote we started the podcast with, Gabe, I think we've got a good one to close here with as well. And it's all about marketing isn't based on instincts, subjective opinions, generalized viewpoints. It's backed by data and science. And I feel like everything we've talked about today is doing exactly that. I made the comment of, we're not going to market on assumptions or, instincts, subjective opinions again. I think that ties in very well to the quote we started with about I'll have to remember what the quote was now if I can remember, but talking about how being a scientist isn't a profession, and it's these experiments affect our daily lives, and A/B testing is one of those things that if you haven't done it, or if you've maybe played with it a little bit, it can have a very positive impact in optimizing your marketing strategy.
And I think with so many different topics we discuss here on the podcast, Zach, a lot of what we're just trying to encourage people to do is just to start. You don't have to come up with this insanely complicated, multivariate testing plan that's many objectives and many different outcomes. just pick a couple of things and give that a shot and see how that goes. And with so many things, it's just about starting. And then once you start to get more comfortable with the process, then you can start to build in that complexity. But yeah, I do feel like, unfortunately, a lot of times we as marketers do fall back on those instincts because we're like, well, we've been doing this for a while. We're smart. We know our customers. We know what they want. And that isn't always the case. And so that's why I think it's so important to test these things to determine what is it that our customers actually, how is it that they want to engage with us? How are they going to buy? All of these different things that become super, super important for driving that longer term customer value.
My first A/B test was an email subject line, and now I'm dangerous with it. So, I don't know what kind of testing you started out with, but I know for a fact it was subject lines. And I mentioned I'm not a big fan of email open rates, but from there, get people into your content. Well, now we can start testing the content within the email in this case. The call to action, with the conversion action we are trying to get our subscribers or our prospects to take. And I feel like we use email as an example a lot today, but we talked about Facebook as well. I think you can A/B test on any platform you have access to, even mobile notifications. Like, segment your data, build out your groups, your control group, and test. That's the only, I shouldn't say it's the only way. It's the best way to get the data to improve your marketing.
Yeah,
especially when it's digital.
Well, yes, especially when it's digital, because you get those instant results. And Facebook is probably where I've done most of my testing, and it's been more around testing placements and seeing what location is it, feed, is it Facebook versus Instagram, is it stories, is it whatever, and running that stuff a little bit more broadly at first, seeing where the results are being driven, and then starting to hone down in on specific placements that I know are getting the most possible, where the most clicks are coming from. And I've had campaigns where we've been able to drive a click-through rate from broadly 1% up to 6 or 7% just by being a lot more thoughtful about the specific locations that ad is being driven by. And because my objective was driving clicks in that particular thing, I would have considered that a successful test, because I was able to learn where we should be placing those ads and then drive traffic, I shouldn't say that, place those ads specifically to drive traffic back to the website that we were looking to drive traffic to. So I think it's, as you said, we talked about email a lot today, but it is definitely something that can be leveraged from a social perspective also, for sure.
This is a great episode, but really any episode where we talk about data is a great episode.
Which is every episode, let's be real.
We know what's going on here, but I think that's everything I had, Gabe, on A/B testing. I feel like we covered everything and some. So for those of you listening to us today, thanks for joining us. Be sure to follow us on your favorite podcast app. And then, Gabe, I think we can announce it now, but
let's do it.
If you're listening on the blog, thanks to Gabe, we have a new platform for you to follow along on. And Gabe, why don't you talk to us about that? I can't talk. Why don't you talk to us about that a little bit?
You're just too excited. We decided. My gosh. So Zach and I were talking a couple of weeks ago, and we were thinking that it would be cool to take some of the videos that we're creating that get uploaded to YouTube and create blog posts off of those. So we're going to take this content, create kind of a short summary of the podcast. It will have the podcast itself, the video in a blog post, and then a short kind of description about what the video is about. So just giving people, I can't remember if it was last week or the week before where we talked about this, but people learn in different ways. Some people are going to learn better from reading through content. Some people are going to learn better through listening to us talk. Some people are going to learn better through listening to us and then taking action with that information. So we want to just give people, this information in multiple ways. So we're excited about this. I think it's going to be fun, be able to have this content visible and or available in different ways.
Awesome. So keep an eye out for that. And again, give us a follow on your favorite app, or you can subscribe on YouTube as well. Otherwise, we will see you all next week with a new topic. Gabe, I have nothing lined up for next week, so I have no sneak peek to give, but we'll talk and we'll find something good.
We've got some good ideas in the hopper. I think we'll have a good one to roll on with next week for sure.
I feel like we have so many good ideas, but then we just kind of like something new will come up, or we're not good at like building out a calendar, but definitely come back next week. We've got the Gabe and Zack guarantee it'll be a good episode. So.